This is a Come Follow Me lesson from the Book of Mormon, and comprising chapters 43 through 63 in the Book of Alma. It has to do with the war chapters. To give you perspective about the war chapters, just remember that the Book of Mormon was being translated into this little home in Harmony Township, Pennsylvania. I have a map on the lower left that gives you the orientation of the Finger Lakes region of New York, and up in the upper northwest of this, you can see a place called Canandaigua that's kind of near the Hill Cumorah. And then you can see that little tiny area in Pennsylvania down there, right on the border of New York and Pennsylvania, is this town called Harmony Township. It's now called Oakland, Pennsylvania. And then to the right of that, I have an image of the home that they stayed in, and up to the northwest of them is the home of the Hale, Isaac, and Elizabeth Hale, and that was Emma's parents. So just put it in perspective, it took about 3 months to do the entire Book of Mormon, 2 months in this building, and then they moved up to Fayette, New York to do the small plates of Nephi. So think about how difficult it would be to come up with a very complex narrative in a remote area where you have no access to libraries or any material that you would do any editing. And the evidence shows that there was no punctuation in the manuscript or any capitalization. So this is just a highlight of how difficult it would be for anybody, even in today's day, to come up with a complete narrative in 3 months' time. So when we read about the Lamanites and the Nephites having wars, let's take a look at who comprised the Lamanites. Naturally, it's a compound of Laman and Lemuel. That's Nephi's older brothers. We had Ishmael that was up in Jerusalem, and of course they married his daughters, but then they in turn came to the New World, and they had their families. Their genealogy became known as Lamanites. Then we have this group called the Amalekites and the Amulonites, and they were really wicked. Now the Lamanites of themselves were sufficiently hardened, but the Amalekites and the Amulonites were still harder. Therefore they did cause the Lamanites that they should harden their hearts, that they should wax strong in wickedness and their abominations. We also have the Zoramites. Again, these are another group of apostate Nephites who lived in Antionum. We have the descendants of the priests of Noah. That's Amulon and his brethren, and they too were apostate Nephites. Then you have the Amlicites. They were, again, apostate Nephites, and we can read about them. And it came to pass that the Nephites gathered themselves together and did consecrate Amlici to be their king. Now when Amlici was made king over them, he commanded them that they should take up arms against their brethren, and this he did that he might subject them to him. Now the people of Amlici were distinguished by the name of Amlici, being called Amlicites, and the remainder were called Nephites, or the people of God. And that's an interesting phrase. You're going to read that quite a bit in the Book of Mormon, and there might be a symbol that relates to the people of God that have been found in artifacts in North America. Now the Nephite dissenters became very wicked. Now these dissenters, having the same instruction and the same information of the Nephites, yea, having been instructed in the same knowledge of the Lord, nevertheless, it is strange to relate, not long after the dissensions they became more hardened and impenitent, and more wild, wicked, and ferocious than the Lamanites, drinking in with the traditions of the Lamanites, giving way to indolence and all manner of lasciviousness, yea, entirely forgetting the Lord their God. That's Mormon, his editorial comments in Alma 47, verse 36. Is this a pattern that is seen in modern day apostates? So what did Moroni, who was a Nephite, who was charged with being the commander of the military of the Nephites, what was his strategy? Well, the first thing he did was he prepared the people with breastplates and with arm shields and also shields to defend their heads. So I have some examples that have been found in the heartland of America with breastplates and head plates. These have been found in different museums and different digs that have been uh, conducted throughout the last century or so. We also have their arm shields that have been found in different locations. The one shown here is that the person's hand is arm is showing it. That came out of Nauvoo. That was located in one of the riverbanks. So the important information here is that what we're reading in the Book of Mormon, we're finding evidence that these types of implements are being found in North America. So another strategy that Moroni took was a defensive strategy to locate the people in places where it would be difficult to get to the people. And so we have natural defenses with rivers and waterways. So you get the Ohio River, the Mississippi River, it could be the River Sidon. Again, we haven't got confirmation on that, but it seems to be a good model for it. And the reason for it is because in the Zion's Camp March, there are two people that were on that camp. In their journals, they had indicated that the ancient city of Manti that was mentioned in the Book of Mormon was in Randolph County in Missouri. So I have a red dot that shows that location. And then you'll see these red dots strewn throughout the Illinois area. And those are places where they have stone walls. And these are very vast. It covers a huge area. And then also in portions of that where the stone walls are near the river, they have this Pounds Hollow recreational area. And you can see that just the immense size of these stone walls that are naturally occurring walls. It'd be very difficult for any army to penetrate that or go around that or climb it or do anything to it. So the map shows the location of the stone walls found atop promontories in the southern region of Illinois, bordering the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. The stone walls appear to have acted as forts to enclose the land bordering the rivers as protective and defensive barriers against invaders. Pounds Hollow is on the right, as I said, and it highlights the immense stone walls that may have offered natural barriers against the Lamanites. Moroni continues with his defensive strategy. He says the Lamanites could not get into their forts of security by any other way save by the entrance because of the highness of the bank, which had been thrown up in the depths of the ditch which had been dug round about. So the map here that I show is from Squire and Davis in a manuscript they call the Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley that was published in 1848, and that's plate 6, and it's known as the first publication of the Smithsonian Institution. And what the surveys show is that this high bank and the walls that surrounded this enclosure could have been a place where the Nephites would have been protected. And then they have this place of entrance, and the place of entrance was designed such that if an invading army came through it, it would be kind of like a killing field because it would be very difficult for them to get into and overwhelm those that were standing guard. And then I have an image that Clark Kelly Price painted that would show a ditch and the berm that would go up, and then the defensive towers that would be on top of that so they can see the enemy coming. But these again are just descriptions, but it follows along with the script of the Book of Mormon, the narrative. And so I bring this in as an example that these are very interesting defensive strategies, and we're finding evidences of those strategies in the heartland of America. Another strategy that Moroni had was they prepared themselves with garments of skins, yea, very thick garments to cover their nakedness. Now, the Jewish calendar starts with the first month of Nisan in early spring, which means on our calendar, and it can go anywhere from March to April because it's a lunar calendar. And the 11th month is between February and March on our calendar. So I have down here in St. Louis, which is in the heartland of America. I have in the red box, I have March and April. But if you go above March, that's February. And you look at the high temperature there, it's about 85 degrees in St. Louis. So it can get very warm in that part of the world um, in February, and then in March and April it can get up into the 90s. So it's not unlike that when we have these garments of skins to cover them and their nakedness in a time frame when you think it would be a hot time frame. It's actually they're in a cold environment, but they're still putting on these thick garments up until the time when it gets really hot. And so the idea is that it's not always in a hot humid environment where they're staying. They more than likely are in an environment where there is all of the different seasons and all the different temperatures. And for them to have this strategy to putting on thick garments in a time where it might be hot would be kind of not normal. Now, we're going to get into Mormon's total liberty and how that can relate to some information that is in the Book of Mormon that have been found in other documents outside of the Book of Mormon and outside of the Bible. So let's read what we see in the Book of Mormon. Now it came to pass that when Moroni, who was the chief commander of the armies of the Nephites, had heard of these dissensions, he was angry with Amalickiah. And it came to pass that he rent his coat, or that means tearing his coat, and he took a piece thereof and wrote upon it, in memory of our God, our religion, and freedom, and our peace, our wives, and our children. And he fastened it upon the end of a pole, and he fastened on his headplate, and his breastplate, and his shields, and girded on his armor about his loins. And he took the pole which he had on the end thereof his rent coat, and called it the title of liberty. Now, in Alma, we can continue. We can see that he says, we covenant. This is the covenant that he is asking the Nephites to do with our God, that we shall be destroyed, even as our brethren in the land northward, if we shall fall into transgression. Yea, he may cast us at the feet of our enemies, even as we have cast our garments at the feet to be trodden under foot. If we shall fall into transgression. Moroni said to them, behold, we are a remnant of the seed of Jacob, yea, we are a remnant of the seed of Joseph, whose coat was rent or torn by his brethren into many pieces, yea, and now behold, let us remember to keep the commandments of God, or our garment shall be rent by our brethren, and we be cast into prison, or be sold, or be slain. So I highlight this because in the Old Testament, when we hear about Joseph's coat of many colors and how his brothers take a goat and they kill it and they take the blood of the goat and put it on the coat of many colors and then gives it to their father Jacob, we don't get the message that there is any trampling of the coat or there's a trampling of anything or the garments being torn. So we're going to review some other material that describes what we're reading in the Book of Mormon to be authentic. In the book of Jasher, we read that Joseph's coat was torn and trampled upon. And this is coming from chapter 43, verses 10 through 13. And it should be pointed out that the English translation of this Hebrew book that was found in Jerusalem in 70 AD was translated in English in 1839 and then finally published in New York in 1840. That's 10 years after the Book of Mormon was published. So let's read it. It says, and Issachar said unto his brothers, here is an advice for you if it seems good in your eyes to do this thing. Let's take the coat which belongeth to Joseph and tear it, and kill the kid of the goats, and dip it in its blood, and send it to our father. And when he seeth it, he will say, an evil beast has devoured him. Therefore tear ye his coat, and behold, his blood will be upon his coat. And by your doing this, we shall be free of our father's murmurings. And Issachar's advice pleased them, and they hearkened unto him. They did according to the word of Issachar, which he had counseled them. And they hastened and took Joseph's coat and tore it, or rent it, and they killed a kid of the goats and dipped the goat of the blood of the kid, and then trampled it in the dust. And they sent the coat to their father Jacob by the hand of Naphtali. So the Book of Mormon is referencing ancient sources that are not found in the Old Testament that we have, which is the King James Masoretic text. So this is an indication that the Book of Mormon is authentic, it's ancient, and there's material that they're drawing from that we don't have in our current Bible. And I propose that they got that information on the plates of brass. And the plates of brass, I believe, came from Egypt. And that is where Joseph was living. And so therefore, that knowledge of what happened to Joseph's coat and what the brothers did to it would be more likely to be on the plates of brass. Should be pointed out that General George Washington also penned a type of title of liberty, and this is when he gave an address to the inhabitants of Canada back in 1775, and he talks about the hardships they're having and what they're having problems with the Great Britain and the colonies, the English colonies. And at the very end, he says, "We have taken up arms in defense of our liberty, our property, our wives, and our children. We are determined to preserve them or die." That seems a lot like a title of liberty to me. Joseph's preserved garment. This is Moroni now speaking. He says, "Yea, let us preserve our liberty as a remnant of Joseph. Yea, let us remember the words of Jacob before his death. For behold, he saw the part of the remnant of the coat of Joseph was preserved and had not decayed. And he said, Even as this remnant of garment of my son hath been preserved, so shall a remnant of the seed of my son be preserved by the hand of God, and be taken unto himself, while the remainder of the seed of Joseph shall perish, even as the remnant of his garment. Now behold, this grieveth my soul, sorrow. Nevertheless, my soul hath joy in my son, because of that part of his seed which shall be taken unto God." That's in Alma chapter 46. So we have another document, and Hugh Nibley, the great researcher, professor at BYU, wrote an article called "The Torn Garment, an Apocryphal Tale," in a landmark book that was used once in the priesthood manual back in the 60s. It was called An Approach to the Book of Mormon. He says, "And when Joseph had made himself known unto them his brothers, he asked them about his father," that's Jacob, of course, saying, "What did my father after I left?" They answered, "He lost his eyesight from weeping." Then he gave them his garment, that's a quamis, meaning a long outer shirt. According to Ad Dahak, that garment was of the weave pattern or design of paradise, and the breath or the spirit odor of paradise was in it, so that it never decayed or in any way deteriorated, and that was a sign or an omen. And Joseph gave them that garment, and it was the very one that had belonged to Abraham, having already had a long history. And he said to them, "Go, take this garment of mine and place it upon the face of my father, so that he may have sight again, and return to me with all your families." Why this is important is that this is not in any Bible. This is from the Islam. And they have, of course, their family is going back through Ishmael, which is the son of Abraham. So in their literature, they have this as part of their story, is that the garment that was given to Joseph had never decayed. So again, I reiterate that Captain Moroni, is using source material that's more ancient than what we have, and therefore the Book of Mormon could not have been made up whole cloth as a figment of somebody's imagination. We're pulling ancient records throughout the Book of Mormon that we'll see throughout the year that show unequivocally that the Book of Mormon is an ancient record. An interesting phrase in Alma chapter 46, verse 40 says, "And there were some who had died with fevers, which at some seasons of the year were very frequent in the land, but not so much with fevers, because of the excellent qualities of the many plants and roots which God had prepared to remove the cause of diseases to which men were subject by the nature of the climate. So in August of 2020, at the proposed Zarahemla Temple site near Montrose, Iowa, and we're getting that from the concept that in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 125, the Lord says, let the name Zarahemla be named opposite to Nauvoo. So whether it is Zarahemla or not, but this is the proposed site of where a temple site might have been. So some descendants of the Native Americans returned to this place where their ancestors 16 centuries ago may have grown and harvested spotted bee balm, which is a medicinal herb for the treatment of fevers and diseases that can result from malaria caused by mosquito bites in seasonal hot summers. The seeds come from the ancient temple site that was necessary for believers to keep the law of Moses. The harvested seed, see the insert on the far left. That's you see the ladies down laying in the field, and to the upper left of them is those little tiny seeds. They connect to a people who had highly developed civilization on the rivers and the lakes of the heartland of America. These seeds are so small, but their connection is so large. I've been to that site, and it is very remarkable. And the number of these spotted bee balm plants that are along the embankment is quite remarkable. And there's a group that have extracted the essential oils, and they have a product called Zarathyme, and they've done testing on it, and it's the only product that can kill virtually all of the bacteria, fungi, and viruses. So it's very medicinal and it's very powerful. Now, the Lamanites, they were naked, save it were a skin which was girded about their loins. Now, that's an interesting phrase, being naked, save a skin which is girded about their loins. Well, here we have artwork that's that was done back in 1853. It's an engraving that was found in a book, and it shows the pilgrims meeting up with Samoset. And take a look at how tall Samoset is, and he's pretty naked, except that he's got a loin cloth on. Everybody else is dressed up with a lot of clothing. Interesting, isn't it? Nathaniel Philbrick, in his book, The Mayflower Story of Courage, Community, and War, rates the following. He says, on a cold March 16th, 1621, in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Now, I grew up not too far from there. In fact, the town I went to high school and grade school and high school was in Plymouth County. The English settlers were startled to see a Native American Indian approach them and with great enthusiasm speak the famous words, "Welcome, Englishmen." His name was Samoset, and he towered over them. He stood before them, a tall, straight man. What impressed them the most was that he was stark naked, with just a fringed strap of leather around his waist. This encounter shows that Native American tribes could acclimate to the colder months, even though non-natives, not accustomed to the cold, needed to be fully clothed for protection from the cold gust of wind. Over a long period of time, thousands of artifacts have been found throughout the Midwest, and a good number of them are up in the Michigan area. And these are just a couple examples. This one here shows that there seems to be a battle scene going on. So off to the left, we see potentially these could be Nephites because they have full clothing on and they have helmets. We're off to the right here, we see that these might be the Lamanites. They have feathers on their scalped head, and they have no clothing. They basically have that loincloth. We have a lot of dead bodies on the ground here, so they obviously are having a battle of some sort. And then we have another image that's been found, and these potentially could be the Nephites to the left because you're seeing their headgear on and their clothing. And off to the right, we've got the Lamanites. Now, if you look at this little thing in the yellow box, that's a symbol that says something, or you can read it from right to left. And these are potentially some Hebrew words that are called Yodeh Va. And it's also in the upper left on this upper panel that I show. And that potentially is what is called the people of God. So when I had mentioned the Nephites were called the people of God, notice that those symbols are on those that have the full protection. So this could be a way of a symbol that says if we imprint these symbols on these artifacts, we're saying that these are the people of God. Whereas over here, we don't see that symbol, and we have these scalped heads with the feathers, and then so these could be the Lamanites. Now, these artifacts are in the southern part of Illinois, and there was a cave that was found by Mr. Burroughs, and these are just a smattering of some of the things that he got out of the cave. And these may be Nephite warriors because they have headgear on, and they have clothing on, and they have their, their bows and arrows. But it's fascinating that you can see that each one of these is quite a bit different, but they're depicting headgear and clothing and war instruments. Notice this image off to the right has a beard. A lot of the Hebrews had beards. In Alma chapter 3, verse 5, we're told that the heads of the Lamanites were shorn. And here we have several images, again, that were found in the Burroughs Cave in southern Illinois that have different depictions of men with their heads shaven. And it could be that these were the Lamanites that are spoken of in the Book of Mormon. Again, these are just suggestions. There's no proof. But when you add up so much of this as a body of evidence, it's pretty remarkable that these things are being found that show some resemblance to what we're reading in the Book of Mormon. We also have some records of Joseph Smith when he was on his journey to redeem Zion, called Zion's Camp or the Camp of Israel. He wrote on May 16, 1834 rather, Zion's camp march came into a piece of thick woods of recent growth near Dayton, Ohio. The prophet commented, I felt much depressed in spirit and lonesome, and that there had been a great deal of bloodshed in that place. In about 40 rods from where I made this observation was a mound 60 feet high containing human bones. So some Hopewell mounds had been found to contain the remains of human bones. Not all of them. And of course, Hopewell is named after Mordecai Hopewell, where there was a mound on his property and they excavated it and they found artifacts. So that becomes the type site for anything that's similar. When they find a mound and they excavate it and they find things that date to that time frame, that will be called the Hopewell people that fabricated these mounds. Zion's Camp had some interesting examples of roving over the plains of the Nephites statement, and this is where we get Nephite mounds being cast up, and this is what Joseph Smith said. During our travels, we visited several of the mounds which had been thrown up by the ancient inhabitants of this country, Nephites, Lamanites, and so forth. And this morning I went up on a high mound near the river, accompanied by the brethren. From this mound we could overlook the tops of trees and view the prairie on each side of the river as far as our vision could extend. And the scenery was truly delightful. On the top of the mound were stones which presented the appearance of three altars having been erected one above the other, according to the ancient order, and the remains of bones were strewn over the surface of the ground. The brethren procured a shovel and a hoe, and removing the earth to the depth of about 1 foot, discovered the skeleton of a man, whose almost entire, and between his ribs the stone of a Lamanitish arrow, which evidently produced his death. Elder Burr Riggs retained the arrow. Now, there's a B.H. Roberts who was 70, and he was very famous in the church, and he wrote several things. And one of the things he wrote was a book called The Missouri Persecutions back in 1900. And on page 135, he makes this statement. He says, after crossing the Illinois River, Zion's Camp passed many of those mysterious earth mounds so common in that section. Mysterious mounds? No, not mysterious to them, for they had with them the record of the peoples who erected them, the Nephites and Lamanites, or more likely still the people of Jared. Now the war chapters can give us lots of lessons, and we can go into a few of these lessons by just taking a look at what some of our general authorities have said regarding some of these war chapters in their conference addresses. So this has to do with Lehontai, who was poisoned by degrees, and this is coming from Elder Robert Hales. He says, in the Book of Mormon, we read about Lehontai and his men camped upon a mount. The traitorous Amalickiah urged Lehontai to come down and meet him in the valley. But when Lehontai left the high ground, he was poisoned by degrees until he died, and his army fell into Amalickiah's hand. By arguments and accusations, some people bait us to leave the high ground. The high ground is where the light is. It's where we see the first light of the morning and the last light in the evening. It is the safe ground. It is true and where knowledge is. Sometimes others want us to come down off the high ground and join them in the theological scrum in the mud. These few contentious individuals are set on picking religious fights, online or in person. We are always better staying on the higher ground of mutual respect and love. And that's his talk called Christian Courage, the Price of Discipleship, back in 2008. Mormon makes an editorial comment when he reviews some of the battles that have gone forth and what happened to the Nephites and Lamanites because of them. He says, and thus we see how merciful and just are all the dealings of the Lord to the fulfilling of all his words unto the children of men. Yea, we can behold that his words are verified even at this time which he spake unto Lehi, saying, Blessed art thou and thy children, and they shall be blessed, insomuch as they shall keep my commandments, they shall prosper in the land. But remember, inasmuch as they will not keep my commandments, they shall be cut off from the presence of the Lord. And we see that these promises have been verified to the people of Nephi, for it has been their quarrelings and their contentions, yea, their murderings and their plunderings, their idolatry, their whoredoms and their abominations which were among themselves, which brought upon them their wars and their destructions. And those who were faithful in keeping the commandments of the Lord were delivered at all times, whilst thousands of their wicked brethren have been consigned to bondage, or to perish by the sword, or to dwindle in unbelief and mingle with the Lamanites. So let's review again the 5 P's of the Abrahamic covenant. The first is property. It's a land of promise, a choice land for his people. Once you're there, you should have prosperity. You should have plenty there in that land and an abundance of the fruits of the earth. Every good and perfect gift must be expected from above, from Heavenly Father. The third thing was a posterity, the increase of their people. The gospel church shall be fruitful as part of temple covenants. So when you go to the temple, you're going to hear about your posterity. And then you get protection from the Lord. Peace under the divine protection is guaranteed if you keep his commandments. Those that dwell in safety, that dwell in God. Victory and success in their wars. It is all one with the Lord to conditionally save many or few. And finally, the priesthood. These are tokens of his presence in and by his ordinances. Those who have the priesthood in their midst and practice those ordinances are always reminded of the covenant they have made with Jesus Christ, who is our deliverer and our protector, a source to which we can look for our own salvation as long as we repent and come unto him. And I bear witness to this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.